Good day, everyone. This is the first part of the next chapter or topic entitled Raising Long-Term Financing. So you can see on the respective picture on your screen about the various sources. So basically, the sources for long-term can be divided into two. We have debt and equity. So if we say debt, we're talking about financial obligations that are to be paid to the creditors of the company. So that's why the debt or the liabilities or financial obligations will be also known as the creditor's equity because this represents the claims of the creditors from the assets or resources of the business. On another hand, we have also the equities or the equity, which means what is left, and that represents ownership of the respective shareholders, for example, of a corporation. So normally this is a corporate setting or setup for financial controllership. And then when we say what is left, which means the residual interest, that is when we deduct liabilities from assets. All right. So in this particular situation, we can see here debentures, term loans as our debt. So that's the first source. While equity capital, preference capital, and retained earnings, these are also the other sources, which is equity. All right. So allow me to show to you now the PowerPoint presentation. This is, again, our part one. So we have two major classifications again. So we have the debt and equity, but to be more specific in this particular source, we have stocks first, common and preferred, and the long-term debt. Ironically, when a corporation is to be liquidated, the preference as to giving of what would be the remaining assets to be paid out to the claimants of the assets remaining of the corporation would be first the long-term creditors from the long-term debt. Next would be the preference shareholders or the preferred stockholders. So remember in our previous discussions about corporation accounting that the IAS's term would be using shares instead of stocks. So that's why we said preference shareholders or preferred stockholders. And we also have the ordinary shareholders or the common stockholders. Okay, so these are normally the dominant source or sources for new financing for corporations across the world. So I have to make that smaller. Okay, so internally generated cash flow. So coming from within the business. So if there are sources of cash flows within, normally these would be the dominant sources, then getting from the external. All right. So that is if the business really is big. Because if not, then the corporation has to outsource or get that from external stakeholders like the creditors and the shareholders or investors. All right. So next one, what are the basic choices? We have the four key decisions that are to be made so that the corporations can continue with whatever projects, normally long term, that they can do. How much capital to raise, how much of that needed capital to be obtained from external sources. Then shall we obtain these funds via capital markets? So meaning to say, shall we go, for example, to stock markets or bond markets wherein there is an active market for the trading of those? Or via financial intermediaries, meaning the brokers, or let's say the mutual fund houses. So these are the investment houses that are engaged with the brokerage. So meaning they're going to look for interested parties. So they have the seller, so they look for buyer and so on. Then what proportion of the external funding should be coming from our three major sources: common stock, preferred stock, or long-term debt? Then there is a mention again of internal financing, in which that would be the cash flow from our operations minus the cash dividends, because the dividends are, of course, the shares of the profits of the investors or shareholders of corporation. Therefore, They cannot be used by corporations. Remember also that the amount of dividends is not fixed. It would depend upon the profits and the performance of the corporation, then how much would be declared as dividends by the board of directors. Then firm can vary dividends and capital structure. Then we can also see, well, I'm going to minimize the screen once in a while because there are footnotes at the bottom. Corporations are almost always net deceivers, so which actually means that corporations are more on spending than on saving. The concept perhaps here is that in economics, the more that we are going to spend the money because of the multiplier effect, that when we spend, the more that it multiplies and multiplies because of earnings and profits. And that's the reason that corporations wouldn't want to keep more or much of their money. They will only keep what is needed. All right, so another concept is about internal versus external. The difference is that if we say internal, we obtain that internally, just like the cash flow from operations minus the dividends, and external coming from stocks and bonds, for example, or long-term debt. What would be the factors that would affect the choice of financing, the decision of management to build up or reduce working capital over time? Working capital basically is assets which are current, of course, minus current liabilities. So this would be the remaining assets that would be available, current to be more specific, for our financing of our projects. So if the management would build up of it, that's why we don't need much of the external financing or the long-term ones. But then if you have fewer or lesser working capital or short-term assets minus short-term liabilities or current, that's why we are going to have more long-term debt. So that's the point of that. Then dividend policy is not fixed. As what we've said, the company may issue or provide from the board of directors, of course, because that is the board that is in charge to approve whatever dividends to be issued by the corporation, and the amount is not fixed. So firm can draw from retained earnings for capital source. This is very true because remember, the dividends are to be obtained also from unappropriated or unrestricted or free retained earnings. The IAS term now is accumulated profits and losses. So if we don't provide much of the dividends, then we can also get from the retained earnings, which is part of equity in the introduction. Then remember, if we raise capital externally, we have to follow the legal requirements, and that would involve higher legal transaction costs also than raising capital internally, which is ours. Now, what would be the marginal benefits of raising capital externally? It's really probable that the company will be able to raise greater sums of money per dollar spent to acquire financing than if we have that internally. Because if we do that externally, there are plenty of interested investors. There are also a lot of banks and financial institutions, provided, of course, that we are going to pass the criteria and the standard and their requirements for borrowings. But then, again, comparing internally, there would be greater probabilities and chances positively that we would be able to get sums of money. Then the marginal costs would be the transaction, legal, and other costs. But then they would usually decline per dollar of capital raised. So the more capital that we are going to obtain, so normally the lesser cost there are or there would be. Next, the financial intermediaries, as what I've said, are the so-called brokers. They are going to look for interested parties to have the, let's say, needed capitalization of the business or corporation in the form of bonds and equities or shares or stocks. By then, they're going to look for buyers and sellers. For example, they have the seller, so they will look for interested buyer. If they have the interested buyer, they will look for interested seller for such. Then this is, of course, based on the US discussions. Well, for financial intermediaries like banks, they play a major or more important role for non-US corporations. So let's not limit our thinking that financial intermediaries are just like the brokers. They can also even be banks. So the financial institutions that we are talking about. Then these are the laws which are there in US that of course we are not affected because we are in the Philippine setting. All right. Then well, should we go abroad, then at least we would be knowing that the McFadden Act of 1927 prohibited interstate banking. In United States of America, remember there are different or various states composing a country. The country is United States of America. The states are those particular small or let's just say fractions or components of the nation or country. And then this act actually prohibited interstate banking. Then, however, as on the summary, in July 1994, Congress passed a bill to allow interstate banking. So, in other words, this is no longer true. While another one, Glass-Steagall Act, mandated separation of investment and commercial banking. So, if we say banks, we should be clear if we are on the side of investing and commercial. However, clearly that was repealed, so that's why we can now see a lot of banks, even in the Philippine setting, that they are doing commercial operations. So they're acting like businesses for profit. At the same time, they also earn through investments, or they're also managing investment funds and they earn in the process. Okay, that's Glass-Steagall. Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act repealed the Glass-Steagall. So this allows commercial banks, securities firms, and insurance companies to join together in a new financial holding company structure as also defined by the Act. However, non-financial companies, they cannot own commercial banks. Clearly because that's like two reverse. That's like apples and oranges, non-financial, and then talking about financial. That's a no-no. You have to get another permit or organize another business. Okay, so this is an illustration about the worldwide offerings and the components of debt and equities. Anyway, so these are the numbers. Next, expanding role of securities markets. The securities markets, again, are normally active markets by which we would be able to trade, buy, and sell our securities, whether that's bond or stock or share. And then here is an information. Securitization repackages loans and other traditional bank-based credit products into securities. So in that particular case, if we say securities, there would be a certain fraction or portion that the parties who are interested are protected in the process, since there would be another institution that would be in charge in managing these particular operations of the markets. In the Philippines, we have the Philippine Stock Exchange, or the PSEI. Then the patterns, we have here the worldwide equity and debt, and then the US. So we can just realize like how big this particular market is. I'm talking about the US vis-a-vis the worldwide. You can notice like 213 versus 504, that's more than half. Then here, that's also more than half. And this one, yeah. So US issuers worldwide actually obtained more than 50% of the worldwide offerings. This is the lesson of this graph. What are the issuances and the patterns? The major global trend is shift towards securitization and diminishing reliance on traditional intermediaries or banks for external financing. So should we like to have securities, there will be active markets for that. We do not just rely on banks for such. Then here, in fact, I said more than 50%, but this is 2/3 of total public issue volume. Then debt issues are over 3/4 of US total every year. So more people are into fixed returns and fixed payments depending on which side you are, if you are on the bond holder or issuer, or you are on the part of the borrower. So of course, if you are the borrower, you have to pay. If you are the investor, then you will receive fixed. While small financing on the equity issues. However, guys, we have to take note that if that is equity, remember we have like more earnings, more chances of getting higher returns should be exposed to higher risk, which are the equities. Then America's initial public offering, IPO stands for initial public offering, which is the first time a company or corporation issues its shares to the public or to the market available for public. This is usually the world's largest and most liquid source of equity capital for small, rapidly growing firms, and most observers consider it a key national asset. Yeah, if you're just a small-time business or person, you can get shares from these IPO market. However, during 2006, the United States trailed both Britain and China in the value of IPO. So Britain and China closely followed and they had competitions. All right, what about investment banking and the public sale of securities? A firm needing external capital faces the following choices. Shall it employ an investment bank to advise and handle the offering? Or another one is approach the private versus public capital market. So shall it issue to the public or just have that as a private one? Shall it negotiate privately with investment banks and the banks will do its job to market the products or solicit competitive bids from the banks? So they're going to ask for interested parties to bid for their particular shares, for example, or issue shares to existing stockholders or shareholders or general cash offering. So remember the right of preemption or preemptive right under the Corporation Code of the Philippines, wherein existing shareholders have priorities compared with the outsiders as to the new issuances and the new authorization of capital for corporations in order for them to be protected with their capital interests. Okay, so here is in 2003 in billions, Global Investment Banking League. So proceeds from that in terms of the shares that they've managed, the number of issues, and disclosed fees. Okay, so you can just notice how great the biggest like disclosed fees are from Citigroup. That's 1,799 in millions. So that's why they're rich or very rich. Next, we have compared this 2006 table with 2003 table based on the previous slide. So we can just compare. I actually noticed that in 2006, Citigroup still like has $1,619 in terms of fees. And looking on the fees, it has the biggest. And then in the previous one in 2003, still it's number one. So Citigroup, I would say in terms of fees, has the highest. And then looking at the proceeds, still it's the highest Citigroup. Next, conflicts of interest. Normally, banks provide advice or advices and underwriting services to companies that want to issue those securities for the highest possible price. So this is how banks also would earn in the process. They will be giving advices as to the shares to be issued by corporations. Then they're going to do the underwriting. So they will also assess like the quality of the particular securities issued. And then they will be able to perhaps look for the highest possible price. Now, banks sell these securities to their own clients who want to purchase securities at bargain prices. So that is the conflict. Wanting to have highest possible price for the sake of the company, its client, but it also has its own clients like those owning the securities or those who are already shareholders and investors, then they want bargain prices. Research analysts working for the investment banks produce reports that are supposed to advise clients on whether the securities are fairly priced. So that's the conflict. On the part of the bank itself, there's a conflict between its client, so the client for the underwriting, and its client for the buyers. While the research analyst supposedly would have to provide the fair report and reliable report. Investment banks cannot solve these conflicts of interest. Instead, they must price new security issues to strike a balance between the revenue maximization goal of the issuing firms and the profit maximization objective of their investing clients. So they have to make a fair price, but then as to what that price is and how do we compute that, that's a matter of professional judgment of a financial manager or an expert in the field, because there is no specific rule of thumb for sure, or there's no specific like what percent, or there's no specific like amount that we can say so that we can have a fair price. Then these are the legal rules governing US public security sales. These are the two basic laws. We have the Securities Act. Well, this is now on the part of SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission in the US, and just like in the Philippines, which is in charge with the governance, monitoring, supervision, regularization of the different public issuances of sales. So this act would prescribe the security issuance procedures, set basic principle of full disclosure. While the Act of 1934 of SEC set up SEC gave it broad regulatory rule-making powers. So securities laws mandate disclosure of all relevant corporate information to potential investors so that the public would be well aware of certain information about a certain corporation that they're interested to invest their monies in or to. They have to do that so that they can make rather wise economic decisions. Investment, banks play key disclosure role by performing due diligence. So this due diligence is providing the best information possible, the reliable one, that the interested investors or shareholders or stakeholders would be needing so that they can make or they can have wise decision making in terms of investing. And that is very critical. Then basic disclosure requirements under this one. By the way, this may differ with our own in the Philippines. However, in terms of concepts, more or less, they are going to be the same. So these are the basic disclosure documents. We have basic disclosure documents. The principal disclosure document is the registration statement, which is filed with the SEC, and the offering only becomes effective with SEC's final approval. Then the offering can be in the primary market, the first secondary market. So that's the second time that the company is offering its shares, meaning we're talking about additional offerings or combination. So primary would sell newly issued shares and raise new capital for the firm. Secondary is that existing shareholders sell their shares. That's why there is no new capital for the firm. It's just a matter of transfer from one shareholder to another. Okay, then shelf registration is a rule that is introduced by, again, SEC, so Securities and Exchange Commission. Qualifying issuers more than $150 million in outstanding stock file a master registration statement that summarizes planned financing for the next 2 years. So that's the plan, or that's a plan. And then the company can offer securities for sale off the shelf. So meaning it's not there on the registration over subsequent 2 years. Okay, so this is the end of our first part. Hopefully you learned something from this session. Thank you very much. God bless and see you in the next part.